Accounts do not die from the content, the schedule, or the captions. The post did not kill them, and the posting time did not kill them. The device story and the network story underneath did. Geelark sells cloud phones aimed squarely at multi-account marketing, and the tooling stacked on top of them is genuinely convenient. But convenience lives at the top of the stack, and trust lives at the bottom. Today I want to compare those bottoms honestly, because that is the layer where this decision actually gets made, and it is the layer nobody shows you in a demo. I run real cloud Android phones in Singapore, over 100 dedicated Samsung handsets, each on its own persistent Singapore mobile IP on a real carrier SIM, reachable over an ADB endpoint with an API and a live view you open in your browser. That is my side of the table, so weigh my bias accordingly. Here is the verdict up front. For spinning up lots of like profiles fast and cheap, Geelark's convenience is real and worth paying for. For a smaller set of accounts you intend to keep for years, or any account that needs to look genuinely Singaporean, a real handset on a real Singapore mobile IP is the sturdier foundation. Let me say what Geelark is selling fairly. It positions its cloud phones for multi-account work across social and e-commerce, the kind of operation where you run many profiles across platforms from one place. The pitch is built around spinning up another cloud phone the moment you need another account. Each account living in its own isolated profile, the whole fleet managed from a dashboard, access handed around a team. I will keep the specifics general because features shift constantly, but the shape is clear. It is a multi-profile machine, and the workflow is the product. Under that workflow, each of those cloud phones is a hosted Android instance running on shared cloud infrastructure, with whatever network egress the provider gives it. That is not a secret, and it is not unusual. It is how nearly everyone in this category builds, because hosted instances are the only way to make profiles this cheap and this instance. Keep that architecture in mind, because everything else in this comparison flows straight out of it. Credit where it is due, because this part is real. If you are an agency juggling dozens of light accounts, the multi-profile workflow saves genuine hours. Creating a new profile takes moments instead of provisioning a device. Everything sits in one dashboard, so a social manager hops between accounts without touching hardware. Handoff between teammates is clean. For content distribution work, posting, and light engagement across many small accounts, that convenience is the whole product, and it delivers. I will go further than that. If every account in your fleet is young, light, and individually expendable, the convenience side of the table is the side that matters, and Geelark style tooling is a sensible pick. The calculus only starts to change when individual accounts become worth protecting, when losing one stops being a statistic and starts being an actual loss. That is the moment the bottom of the stack begins to matter more than the dashboard on top of it. So let me talk about that bottom. A cloud phone profile on shared infrastructure is a hosted Android instance. Its hardware identity is synthesized, its sensors are simulated or simply absent, and it shares a physical server with strangers. It can be created in seconds precisely because nothing physical exists behind it. That is the property that makes it cheap, and it is also the exact property a platform's device checks are built to notice. A real handset is one physical object with one honest story. A real board, a real radio, real sensors, a build that attests cleanly because there is actual hardware to attest. It takes up rack space and costs real money to run, which is why nobody can conjure 100 of them in an afternoon. Serendipitously, here is what social and e-commerce apps actually look at because they are the most aggressive device checkers in consumer software. They read device signals, they run integrity checks that lean on genuine hardware, they score the network the login arrived from, and they watch how all three of those stories hold together over time. I will keep this general because the exact checks shift constantly and nobody outside those teams knows them all. The direction of travel is what matters, and the direction gets stricter every single year. The operational consequence is the part that trips people up. A hosted instance does not necessarily get banned on day one. Far more often it gets quietly classified. Reach that quietly underperforms. Verification prompts that keep coming back. Features that never quite offer themselves. You cannot debug what you cannot see, and the cause is sitting at the bottom of the stack, in the device and the network, where no amount of content strategy can reach it. The network half deserves its own sections, because it is where the two products separate the hardest. A social account that matters should show up from the same kind of place a real person shows up from, and real people are on mobile carriers. With a hosted instance, you get whatever egress the provider built, or a proxy you attach yourself, shared and shifting, and you mostly cannot choose it. With Cloudf.one, each phone has its own persistent Singapore mobile IP on a real carrier SIM. One phone, one account, one network identity that never contradicts itself. And the Singapore part is not a small detail, it is often the entire reason someone calls me. A real Singapore carrier SIM on a real Singapore mobile IP is a genuinely different thing from a proxy labeled Singapore bolted onto a cloud phone somewhere else. An app that cares about location reads the network behind the login, and the real mobile carrier looks like a place where ordinary people live, because that is exactly who is on it. The whole environment reads Singapore because the phone is physically sitting in a rack in Singapore, not because a label says so. Persistence is the underrated half of that sentence. An account that logs in from the same mobile network identity every day for a year has a boring, consistent story. And boring and consistent is exactly what trust models reward. An account whose network story keeps changing underneath it is asking to be looked at more closely, which is the opposite of what you want. When in doubt, ask one question of any setup. Would this login pattern look normal coming from a person's actual phone? If the answer is no, the trust model probably agrees with you. So let me say plainly what Cloud.one is. Real Samsung handsets racked in Singapore. Over 100 of them, each one dedicated to a single customer at a time. Every phone has its own SIM and its own persistent Singapore mobile IP. You drive a phone three ways: a live browser view for hands-on work, so the phone in the rack behaves like a phone in your hand, an AdBeep endpoint over the network for automations, and an API to list phones and lock one to a job, which matters the moment you are operating more than a couple. There is no profile magic here, and I will not pretend there is. One phone is one identity, and for long-lived accounts that is the entire point. It helps to think of a serious account like an asset with a depreciation curve that runs backwards. It gets more valuable the longer it lives. An aged account with a consistent history earns reach, survives review, and carries a weight a fresh account simply cannot buy. That value accrues on top of stability, and stability is a property of the bottom of the stack, the same device, the same network, and the same rhythms for months on end. This is exactly why the instance model and the asset model fight each other. Hosted instances are built to be created and destroyed. Assets need to persist. If your accounts are expendable by design, the instance model fits perfectly and you should use it. If each account is a slow compounding asset, you want it anchored to one real device and one real mobile IP that never churns underneath it. The two are not better or worse, they are built for opposite jobs. So the honest split is not which product wins, it is which fleet you are actually running. Many light profiles means volume distributions, each account small, losses expected and priced in, and that fleet wants cheap instant profiles and a good dashboard, which is Geelark territory. Few heavy accounts means each one carries revenue, a client relationship, or years of history, and that fleet wants one real handset per account. Most real operations are quietly both at once, and the mistake is running the heavy accounts on the light infrastructure just because the dashboard was already open. Sort your accounts by what losing them would cost, and the infrastructure question mostly answers itself. Practically, here is what operating on a real phone looks like. The browser view handles the human work, checking messages, reviewing a post, finishing a verification step, exactly as if the phone were in your hand. The AdBeep endpoint handles the machine work, so scheduling tooling, a UI automator script, or an Appium suite can drive the real handset for the repetitive parts. The Appium ties it together for teams, list the phones, lock the one you need, release it when you are done. So two people never fight over one device. That is less instant than spawning a profile from a dashboard, and I will not pretend otherwise. It is the trade-off you accept when each identity has to be real all the way down. Operational methods, I want to be clear about the boundary, because this sits right next to things it must never become. Keep any multi-account used to legitimate rule-following purposes. Your own accounts and your own clients run inside the terms you agreed to. A real device does not make rule-breaking acceptable, and neither does a hosted one. This is a tool for honest operators who need each account to be genuinely real, not a way to fake your way past a control that exists for a good reasons. Keep it pointed at work you would be comfortable explaining. So that is the reason Cloud.one exists. Real Samsung handsets in Singapore on dedicated hardware, each with its own persistent Singapore mobile IP on a real carrier SIM, Singtel, StarHub, M1 or Vivify across prepaid and postpaid lines. Not an emulator, not a data center address, not a proxy wearing a Singapore label, a genuine phone you reach over an ADB endpoint, drive through an API, and control live in your browser. Start at Cloud.one and use code YT30 on your first month. Silitons at Pitolpe. Dionanisa YT30 on your first month. Silitons at Pitol. So to recap, Geelark is a convenient multi-profile cloud phone product built for multi-account marketing, and for fleets of light, expendable accounts its convenience genuinely earns its keep. But its profiles are hosted instances on shared infrastructure, and long-lived accounts live or die at the bottom of the stack on device truth and network consistency. One anchors each identity to one real Samsung handset with one persistent Singapore mobile IP, which is the sturdier foundation for accounts meant to last years and for any account that needs to read as genuinely Singaporean. Sort your accounts by what losing them cost, place them on the right layer, and there is nothing stopping you running both, the light layer for volume and the anchor layer for the accounts that carry real value. Build the anchor layer first, and the rest of the stack gets easier. I'll see you in the next one.